Awesome. All right, man. So, hey, it's been a minute. Good to catch up again.
Yeah, man,
Glad to hop back on. I missed these sessions, so excited for our
definitely.
conversation. So let me tee up the first thing. So I've had a couple of really interesting conversations with folks over the past few weeks, and looking forward to kind of getting your take on some of the I don't know some I guess the general direction that I feel like conversations are happening between me and, let's say, folks that may have different political leanings, and just kind of busting through, I guess, kind of hyperbole and extreme thoughts and trying to make it a little bit more real and tangible. And I'll give you two examples. So the first example was I was having a conversation, this was literally yesterday, about the pharmaceutical industry.
Mhm.
And, one of my friends and both of our kids play football together, and we were chatting on the carpool ride. And, he was saying, like, I just believe that the pharmaceutical industry has a cure for cancer and other diseases, and they're just not releasing it out into the public because it wouldn't make them enough money to eradicate a disease. And this is their business model, to withhold, that type of a cure. And instead, they just want to give treatments to drugs. And that's the way that they continue to make money. And so I said, let's break that apart a little bit, because obviously his wife works in the pharmaceutical industry. I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry for many, many years. And
Sure.
my take was that, like, they are commercial organizations, and pharmaceutical companies do a lot of research and development. And I dismiss the fact that there is a true cure for a disease that they would not want to commercialize. But what I did concede to is, if you're an executive and you're looking at all the molecules and all the solutions that are out there to cure diseases, you may fund and prioritize those that you think were going to result in a higher rate of return for shareholders and for investors, because that's what your job is. That's the job of a publicly traded company, is to return value to shareholders. And so when you're making decisions to prioritize which molecules and which cures to invest in, you're going to be prioritizing those that are going to have the highest likelihood of returning shareholder value. And I said, so if there's a cure out there that can, result in large sums of money to cure that disease, I think that's the way. And that if I was an executive, that's the way that I would be compelled to invest, because that's my mandate, that's my job. And he said, like, okay, like, yeah, I get that. Like, he kind of conceded the point a little bit, and then he kind of recorrected and said, like, well, no, you're right. Like, I don't think that they have a cure that they're not releasing, but I agree with
Mhm.
your point that how they invest and how they come up with and prioritize solutions or treatments is based on returning shareholder value. And so I just thought, like, it's a very nuanced point, but I think
Hmm.
it does help to kind of break up this conspiracy theory that, like, there's this big giant, cabal of people that are the puppet masters and they control everything. And I think people feel that way, and we can get into that. Like, that's like why people feel that way. I mean, he and I had a really interesting discussion about why people feel that way. But
Sure.
before we get into that, I think that, like, this conversation I thought was productive in a sense that, like, people that have experience and work in these industries know what is really going on, but we don't have the ability to disseminate that information to others that are just consumers of pharmaceutical products, who are seeing high prices, difficulty in getting drugs, and who really feel like some of these cures to these specialty medications that are coming out are unreachable to them because they're just too darn expensive. And when you kind
Right.
of feel that gap of, like, accessibility and from where you are, and you don't see that there's a bridge to that, you just say, like, that's just somewhere out there. That's for other people. That's for elites. Like, that doesn't help me. And then you get into this whole world of, like, well, I don't understand this. This must be a big conspiracy. So anyway, let me
Right.
stop there and get your take.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. I like the fact that uh, you didn't react negatively right away and you kind of talk through it. I think that is really important. And I think my knee-jerk reaction would be to would be to take that and just react negatively to it and just say, well, that's bullshit. And but that doesn't help the conversation, right? That doesn't help discourse to have that knee-jerk reaction. So I think that I commend you for that. But yeah, it's interesting. I think when people don't understand a system, that tends to happen, right? I'm kind of talking about good faith arguments, right? Where people really truly don't understand um, a system, and then to explain it away, maybe they come up with a conspiracy thing. I'm not talking about, the latest one I heard about was that, the latest hurricane was engineered somehow, which I don't even know how that would work. But I don't think those arguments are in good faith. But I think, if you're talking to someone and they do have a good faith argument that they don't understand something and they think it's conspiracy, I think we should take that, you know, on face value and try to counter it with argument, with reason. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't really know how much of a difference that makes in the
Mm,
long term. That's the only thing I would argue, right? Like, because I think that that's a certain mode of thinking that maybe comes from a little bit of ignorance, but also just a way of thinking that is hard to counter something. Well, what's the famous quote that you can't reason someone out of an argument that they didn't reason themselves into, right?
that's right.
So yeah, that's the thing I struggle with conspiracy theories.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I agree that it's an uphill battle because when you have a gap of where you are in, let's say, your baseline understanding of a concept, just like when we learn physics and chemistry in school, like you can't learn about organic chemistry without understanding some basic chemistry, the periodic table, and kind of just
Sure.
your fundamentals, which is why we have a public education system so that, you know, when you have a PhD scientist or when you have Albert Einstein coming out and throwing out things like the theory of relativity, if we have a society that doesn't have basic understanding of basic physics like you learn in public school, everybody's going to think that, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Like
Right.
Einstein
Yeah.
was some, like that's how it happens. And so we've like that, like, I don't know, maybe like the gap between how far and how quickly we're advancing scientifically is just accelerating. And I think like our public school systems are failing us in the sense that we're not able to get a baseline of understanding of scientific concepts that allow society to not feel like advancement is leaving them behind. And so instead of working hard to really, to your point, the good faith point that you made is exactly right. If you don't want to take the time to learn and understand how the building blocks stack up to understand a difficult concept, then your default is going to be just some conspiracy theory. It's going to be, well, this is an explanation that's just the easiest thing and it makes sense. So I'm just going to go with that. Instead of, say, having a conversation with somebody, let's go back to the example that works in the industry. Like
Mhm.
people that have seen how some of these decisions get made at a large corporation that can then provide the insight to say, that's not how the system works. Like there are checks and balances in place. There is some morality. There is some ethics in some of these decisions that get made because at the end of the day, they are human. But if you are, again, don't have this just like that basic grounding, then yeah, you have to put that work in before you can come to the table and make an argument that contradicts what I would say makes sense, like a logical, that's not a conspiracy theory, that's more of a logical argument.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
So how do we fix that, dude? Like, I mean, I think there's so much that we can do just like conversationally with our
Yeah.
peers and our neighbors and like our group of friends that we meet with. But I mean, there's just systemic stuff that we have to fix. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, we talk. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think, yeah, more conversation. But I hate to do this, but the media has a lot of blame to take, right? Just the public discourse in this country, I think, is heavily influenced by our media, and I think they have to shoulder like a lot of that blame because obviously, we've talked about this before. The extreme voices are what make it to the media, right? And I think it drowns out the kind of middle, where you have the extreme voices on either side, but then it drowns out the people in the middle, and that's what draws eyeballs. That's what draws clicks, and unfortunately, that's the direction we've taken with our media. And uh, I hope there's a way back from that, but I don't know. But yeah, I think, to your point, more conversation, talking about it, you know, that's why I think podcasts are so important, because you do get perspectives from people who have intimate knowledge of it. There's so much gatekeeping. There was so much gatekeeping with old media, right? And there's less of that with podcasting. You can have a direct conversation with a person and get their input and get their insights into an industry, like you said. And I think that can only help, right? I think that can only help inform people and guide them and, make them believe that, yeah, maybe there isn't a conspiracy. Maybe, there's people, there's actual human beings that are working in these companies. Yeah, I think that's a good starting point.
I think if we make and we go back to conversations that we've had, man, of like, why do we go through the, the doom scrolling, and why do we tune into MSNBC and Fox News? And, we know that both of these, news agencies are representing either extreme of the political spectrum. And essentially the audience just wants to go and get their dopamine hit or validation of their beliefs. And it's only going to further divide us because, just exactly like you said, like, those voices are only going to get more and more extreme to be able to keep the audience engaged. And from my experiences and these conversations that I've had, they're a hell of a lot more fun than watching MSNBC or Fox News or CNN.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
engaging
Yeah.
and talking with my neighbors and just having that kind of opening to say, yeah, you and I, like, I know we're on different political spectrums. Like, I know you're going to vote for Trump and I'm going to vote for Harris. Like, whatever. Like, we're on different political extremes, but I've started feeling like I'm not just judging them and saying, like, "Screw you," like, "You're an idiot," like, "How could you do that?" Like,
Hmm.
I'm to the point now where, like, let's just talk, because, like, continuing to polarize each other isn't working. And so
Sure.
let's just have an honest discourse, because and let's make it fun. Like, let's make it intellectual. Let's make it engaging. And if there's building blocks that we need to talk through so that we can feel like we're on a level playing field, and we both are willing to agree that there's stuff to learn from each other versus what we both have kind of established our baseline beliefs from through, let's say, inputs that may not be credible. Like, let's trust each other a little bit more than we trust outside input from especially media. If they're
Right.
experts, if there's journals, if there's credible sources, yes, like, that should be valid. But it's like, well, dude, I heard this on, MSNBC, or I heard this on Fox News. Like, well, come
Yeah.
on. Let's
Right. Yeah. But how do you get beyond that though? Like, I'd love to hear your tips because I struggle with that a lot. I tend to, because I know it's going to be such a contentious thing. I tend to shut down when that happens, and not pursue it. So I do need to get better about that, especially when I'm talking to people that I know are uh, may not have the same political bent as me. So yeah, I'd love to hear your tips, like actual, hard, actionable tips.
yeah. So I think step one is you have to build a relationship before you earn the right to have that conversation. And the relationship
Yeah.
has to be built on a mutual interest. Football,
Right.
kids' activities, kids' sports, running, musical instruments. Like, we have so much more in common than we do different. So the first thing to start is, you don't lead with political discourse.
Right.
You lead with the common value, the common interest, the common shared enjoyment. I mean, this is where, like, having parties, drinking, socializing, it lets people's guards down, and you build relationships that allow you to then open the door to talk about your political positions in a more, like, civil way, because you guys have this, like, platform and baseline that you trust each other off of, because you both know that, hey, we like going out and, eating at a nice restaurant and having a
Right.
conversation about what's going on in our local town. And you could even start with local town politics, like, changing the speed limit on your road, or, like, should we raise our like, there's a bill out there to raise our local taxes to help the school. Like, well,
Hmm.
let's understand that. Is that worthwhile? I think, like, establishing a relationship, making it more local, I think those are two really meaningful steps that can help to earn the right to then get into more of a political discourse. But that does require both sides to let their guard down, to engage in a common activity that everybody enjoys. And we have to be inclusive in those. Like, invite your neighbors, even if they have a Trump sign or even if they have a Harris sign up on their lawn. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're having
Hmm.
a thing in your neighborhood, like, invite them over. We're all neighbors. Like, to me, that was what America was built off of. America was built off of your neighbors, taking care of them, and having a society that puts country over everything else, right? And if you put country over everything else, then you build a immediate connection that you then iterate off of to challenge your beliefs and be willing to concede that, hey, you're not perfect. And both parties needs to say that, hey, we have something to learn from each other. And if you both go into that saying, hey, we have something to learn from each other, you put the guard down and then you're willing to be open to hear what the other person has to say. So I don't know. Those are a couple that come to the top of my
Yeah,
mind
no,
of
that
what's worked for me.
those are yeah, those are some great points. Yeah, I think breaking down those barriers is really important, right? Because otherwise we can't get past where we are now. So yeah, I'll have to take some of those tips and put them into action. But yeah, I think I've tried to. I think it's just the breaching those kinds of conversations are difficult, right? It is difficult.
It is.
So yeah, I think building connection outside of politics, I think is a good starting point.
And listen, you and I, and this one I don't know how to fix other than like, and we have to prioritize our time and we have to look for, and when we have to look forward, but like, we're all so busy. We know how hard it is for you and I to even find time to do the pod. And especially the phase of life that we're in with child raising, career development, and also trying to kind of give back and do podcasts that we think are gonna not only help us but help for social discourse more broadly. Finding the time to spend time with our neighbors and have these conversations, I think, is really the hard part. And you have to look for these opportunities, whether it's going to your kids' sporting events and just kind of, talking and socializing a little bit, hi, hello, very casually. But then by design, having, social events within a neighborhood, within your community, and like community advocating, we all have to become part of it. We're all frustrated with our current political system. There isn't a single person that I've spoken to that is like super excited and like these are the one of these two candidates is going to really save our country. We're kind of
Yeah,
like I'm picking the best of what my options are. Like nobody feels like either one of the candidates that we have right now are like going to save our country. And I'm not saying that that's what we should look for in a leader. We want to kind of have somebody that we think can, you know, at least be a uniting voice and whatever. Let's leave that part like aside for now. My
yeah,
point is that if we don't start building and rebuilding democracy from a local level, then we shouldn't even worry about the national level because we won't get good candidates. The way to get good candidates nationally is to start building locally. And so we have to invest our time locally. Forget about the debates, forget about the national like discourse that's happening about politics because it doesn't really impact you that much. Just focus
right.
on your local community politics, elect good people, or run yourself. Like if you're
Mm,
that frustrated with it, do something and run for something locally. Join a school board, run for mayor of your town. Like join the local board, the zoning board, or whatever you want. Like participate in it. Go to a town meeting. Like go to go to your community center and go listen at a what I don't even know what they're called, like a town meeting.
yeah, like council meeting or town hall
Yeah,
or
like
whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. No, the great tips. I think we could all stand to get more involved, but yeah, like you said, it's difficult time wise, and with everything people have going on and
Yeah.
kids and all that stuff. But I think it's important that we make the time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about it and being frustrated with it. Like,
Right,
like the like, I don't know, just aggregate together the time we spend, reading news and like getting all activated and agitated about what's happening in the
right.
world. And it's like, well, I don't know if I take 30 minutes and like, I don't know, just go to a town meeting. I mean, now, like, maybe a lot of towns even have Zoom meetings. Like, you might not even have to physically go.
That's
You might
true.
even be
Yeah,
able to
yeah,
dive
that's a good
into like
point.
a Zoom or something like that.
Yeah, I
So,
think our town does have both virtual and in person. So I think another interesting point is well, if we go back to conspiracy theories, I think some education there, right? Because yes, there have been conspiracies, right? It's not like every conspiracy theory is bullshit because
right.
yeah, there have been conspiracies in the past, right? And they've held it back. But I think it's important to understand that to have a conspiracy, you have to look at the scale of it, right? For something like pharma, right? If they're holding back a disease, the number of people that you would need to be involved in that conspiracy would be vast and massive. And I just don't think human beings are capable of keeping secrets that big, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you look at government conspiracies too. Like, let's go back to, the moon landing, right?
Yeah.
In order to have faked that, you're talking about thousands of scientists, thousands of people, not just scientists and camera crews and directors, and like the number of people that would have to be involved in that is just so massive that, you know, we just, if you educate people that, human beings are just not capable of keeping secrets for that long. Like, so we have what, how many years are we at? 60 years since that happened? In that 60 years, nothing came out, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I find that hard to believe.
No, it's true. It's true. And that's the whole rub of conspiracy theories is that, every now and then there may be an element of truth into it, right? And it's almost like and that's why I think the conversations like what you just said, like busting through, like and saying like some rational points that just kind of can just sow that seed of doubt into the conspiracy theory. And you don't have to really concede the whole theory. Like you just have to kind of concede the kind of points that are really ludicrous. Like what you said, like just like the parts, like because there's some like it's like the spin to it, right? Like, okay, so if you think that it was staged, what do you really mean by that? Like what do you mean? Like, because the point that you make would be like, you think this many people could really be in on something like that? Does that really make sense? Like
Right.
flat earthers, like, there's some wild ones out there for sure. You
Yeah.
touched on the one about the weather. And, I ended up talking a little bit to somebody about the weather one too. The same thing with the hurricane. And they like started talking about how like, isn't like, maybe there is some truth to like what we're doing with lithium mining and releasing these chemicals, and then we can release chemicals that create, reactions in the sky that cause these catastrophic events. And I started saying like, okay, that's really interesting. So
That's interesting. Yeah.
maybe you're right, like maybe there is, but like, do you think that our government or like some cabal would be skilled enough to orient that to start a storm in an ocean, know exactly where it's going to map out and have it target Tampa Bay, Florida, and destroy the real estate there because BlackRock has made a large sum of investment in property on the coast of Florida?
Right.
Like, dude, that's a lot of shit that has to go right.
Yeah.
Like, does that really and my response back was like, don't you think BlackRock has a lot more easier ways to make money than like trying to orient a storm that may or may not hit Florida? Like, don't you think there's other factors that led to them investing in Florida real estate than that? Like, I don't think it's that like big of a leap of faith to say that Florida is going to be hit by hurricanes. I mean, I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. Like, there's been plenty of research with climate change that shows that the rate of storms, and we all feel it, we even see it here in New Jersey, like the rate of storms, the amount of heavy rains that we've gotten, the extreme weather has certainly increased in our lifetime. I don't think anybody would argue that. We see it, we feel it. So I don't think it's that big of a leap of faith to say that there's going to be hurricanes hitting Florida. To connect that there's
Right.
a conspiracy that's driving the hurricanes, gosh, it just seems very difficult for me to believe, man. Like, who the hell would do it? Like, who would benefit from hurricanes hitting our country? Like, is somebody weaponizing it? Like, is Iran creating hurricanes to destroy America? Like, what is the point of it? Like, that's the thing that
Right.
I don't understand. Like, who benefits from this?
Yeah, and even if there was some benefit, like you said, with the whole real estate thing, I mean, the amount of collateral damage and, deaths and money having to be spent to clean up, like, I can't imagine that that is all worth it to, for that one purpose, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense
Yeah.
to me. But anyway, I mean, even if like, I feel like conspiracy theories can start and conspiracy theories can be busted through the same process, which is follow the money. I mean, I think um, we live in a capitalistic society, a capitalistic world. You and I have spent,
Hmm.
many, many podcasts talking about kind of the pros and the cons of capitalism and kind of where we think, we need to start evolving our capitalism too to fix our democracy, really. And even when you look at the hurricane example and you follow the money, it would just same thing with like it goes back to your same point about the moon landing. The amount of people that would have to be involved to benefit financially from a hurricane hitting our country is just massive. It's impossible to collude that much. Like,
Right.
first
Yeah.
of all, to control the weather, like if somebody
Right.
had the technology to control the weather, like I'm thinking X-Men and Storm now, like how powerful
Right.
they would be. Like they would be doing,
Or like
there's
a
much more better
James
use of
Bond
that.
villain, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's way more ways to make money with that power than the randomness of hurricanes right now. Okay, like can we
Yeah.
all agree to that part? So
Well,
let's
it's
dispel
funny.
that.
It's funny you say that because what was it? There was one of the later Pierce Brosnan James Bonds. One, I think that one of the storylines was the guy was trying to control the
Yeah,
weather, and it
yeah,
was so far fetched at the time. Like that was one of the knocks against the movie is that that is so far fetched. And now we've come to the point where we have conspiracy theories saying that that's real, right? Like
exactly.
it's insane.
It is insane. All right. I know we're getting maybe close to the end here, but I have a positive story. Maybe we end on, let's
Yeah,
say, like an optimistic view here.
sure.
Was listening to another podcast and they had a guy on there and, he's been very financially successful and they're talking about the progression of like what financially successful people should do. Like first you kind of get your nut, you kind of do your project, you're a missionary, excuse me, you're a mercenary and you kind of go through and you just do what you need to do to get your nut and to get your bolus of money. Then maybe
Mm,
you become a missionary and you have kind of a mission and you say, this is the mission that I want to fix healthcare or like I want to fix democracy or whatever, right? You kind of go on your mission. And then he kind of introduced this really interesting third concept and he said then you become an artist and then you try to inspire. And he's like, we've lost citizens that want to inspire, right? Like Musk
mm,
is maybe whatever about his politics, but he's no question an industrialist, and he's created and invented progressed society and had an impact on society in a way that very few people in our world really have. The progression of EV, Starlink satellites, SpaceX. Like, just think about those three alone. For one person to do that, one dude has done all three. Like,
absolutely.
you can't take that away. And when you look at what we would like to see next from somebody like an Elon Musk is to do something artistic that inspires everyone. And like the examples that are brought up are like, hey, we used to do things like, the Statue of Liberty, like create a monument and give it to a country just to kind of flex and say, hey, look, like we can do these great human achievements just for the sake of proving that we are a species, a country, a civilization that can do great things just for the sake of doing something great with no ulterior motive from a capitalistic perspective. Like,
Right.
keep capitalism healthy through artistry and through inspiration as opposed to pure like let's just beat the productivity out of our workers so that we can get more money. Like,
Right.
guys, that song and dance is overplayed now. Like, you've gotten everything out of society. You're kind of killing the golden goose that's laying that egg that drives capitalism. You got to find something else. And like we think about like the one example that came up was like the Las Vegas Sphere. Like that to me is one of the cool inspirational activities that we've seen in our society that, and it wasn't even like Musk, it was like, I think it was James Dolan, right? Like, and his
Right.
group
Yeah.
that ended up putting that, the MSG group, right? And so that was, and to me, that's inspirational. Like that's something that was done. Now it's still capitalistic, right? Like I know he's going to make money
Sure.
on it, but it was done in an artistic way that shows what progress can mean in a way that everybody can, well, maybe not everybody because it's probably too expensive to get in, but
Right.
I don't know. Like we need something that's more accessible than even that everybody could go and appreciate just from like a artistic nature that, hey,
But
this
no,
person is really trying to
though,
progress society.
no,
Yeah.
to your point though, it is inspirational because everyone can enjoy from the outside at least, right? It's
True.
not
That's
only an
true.
interior space. You look at
Very
something like
true.
the Sydney Opera House, right? I mean, that's very old, but it's an architectural marvel because of where it sits and of its form and function, right? But that is a visual thing that you can enjoy when you go to Sydney. And this, I mean, you go to Vegas and you can probably see it from multiple vantage points in the city. And it can be inspirational because it is a form of public art, I would say, right? Because it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. there's doing some really innovative things with what they show on the outside of that. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, even take out the internal function of it, which is the concert hall, and just look at the outside. And yeah, I think absolutely that can be inspirational, right? To
Awesome
anyone.
point. No,
Yeah.
great point, bud. Yeah, no, and he didn't have to do that, right? Like, they
Right.
didn't have to design that so that people can enjoy it from the outside. That was, I'm sure, a shit ton of money that went into
Oh
the
yeah.
outside of it. And to your point, like, and that's just for public good to kind of enjoy, and that's a great point. I didn't think of it that way. So,
Yeah.
yeah, very
And
true,
it goes
man.
back to your whole point about the Statue of Liberty. I mean, you look at, you know, and I know we're leaving politics aside, but someone like Modi who in India who put that statue, I forget who it was of, just like this super massive statue. And really, I mean, a statue doesn't really serve a function, but yeah, it can inspire people. It is massive. I think it's the largest statue in the world, or largest human statue in the world. But yeah, that has inspired people. It's been kind of shared all over the world, and people go there to just to see that statue. So yeah, I think you're right. Public art, things like that can really inspire people, and it's an incremental thing, right? Where yeah, you're not going to inspire this person to do something great, but then maybe he'll do something else better, and then that will inspire someone else, and it's kind of a domino effect that can have, right?
Definitely. Cool, man. Well,
Yeah,
let's hope that we can get more of that. I mean, we need it. We
yeah,
need we
we
need we need
certainly
our
do.
leaders to inspire our society to continue to do more, and um keep us, motivated to get the best out of ourselves, and we need it.
Yeah, definitely. Before we end, I did want to plug one thing. A really good friend of mine who I worked with over 20 years ago, actually. We still keep in touch. Brian Van Dyke just published his first novel, so I wanted to plug it. It is
Nice.
In Our Likeness by Brian Van Dyke. I
Nice.
just finished reading it. It is fantastic. It is based around AI. It's a story. I mean, the core of it is about AI, but it's a human story. It's about a man who's kind of struggling with an AI algorithm, and all kinds of crazy stuff happens. But it is a really great story, and I really enjoyed the novel. So I just want to plug that. Again, that's In Our Likeness by Brian Van Dyke. It's available on Amazon and Kindle and all that kind of stuff. So go out and look for
Awesome. Go, Brian.
it.
I'll check it out myself.
Awesome. All right, great. That was great,
Uh,
man. It was good
Yeah.
catching up. We'll try to get these out more regular, but
Awesome. That's the pod.
that's the pod. See you next time.
See you next time.